how do you know when it's time to go to the hospital? Because some people are getting sick, but their symptoms are mild. So when do you decide? I think I need to go.
Well, there's actually two parts to that question that we can talk about. First is you want to know if you have the disease or not. You just want to know so you can make sure that you're not out spreading it while going to the public spaces and so forth when you're sick. And so you want to get tested. Now the challenge we have today, and it continues week after week, that we don't have nearly enough tests in this country.
Right.
There's been surely problems in making this test. We test a few thousand people while people in South Korea are testing 100,000 people a week. We're working on that, but a lot of people have been frustrated because they couldn't get tested to see. So today we have a very short list of people with the highest risk, having been to China or knowing someone who is a case already, to get tested. Hopefully that'll change in the days ahead. The second reason you want to know about that is because some people can go on and get severely ill. And it's important to know early in your illness, am I someone that has this virus infection, and I need to be watched carefully so that should after a week I start to get more severely ill, that you might very well be considered to be hospitalized. Not at the moment that you first had it, but later on. Unfortunately, we now know that on average, many of the people who get severely ill and need really high-level intensive care medicine often don't get that sick until the second or third week of their infection. So by knowing that, you and your doctor can work together to figure out, do I need to see you now or not? So it's good to call your doctor if you have a flu-like illness, muscle aches, fever, chills, headache, dry cough. If you have that, then it's worth calling your medical clinic. Don't go in. Don't go to the emergency room. You don't want to expose anybody else if you have it. But then let them tell you what to do and where to be seen.
So what are those all the symptoms, doctor? Like what are the specific symptoms? Is it just the dry cough, headache, fever, body aches? Are there any other symptoms?
Those are the primary symptoms. And if you have a few of them, not even all of them, and you have them for more than a few hours, that's when you want to call and find out, should I come in?
Okay.
Now, fortunately, we're having less and less influenza in this country. We had a bad flu year. And those are also the symptoms of influenza in their early stages. And so we had a lot of confusion. Do I have influenza or do I have a COVID-19 infection?
Right.
And so as the flu season winds down, we are more suspicious when somebody has that kind of a symptom that, in fact, they very well may have COVID-19. And as you've heard over the past days, we're seeing more and more cases in this country who had no known contact with someone who had COVID-19 or someone who had been to a high-risk country for this. And that's what we call community transmission, meaning when we talked earlier about were you in a room with someone, were you in the same shopping center earlier this week before some of them closed, that you didn't even realize that the elevator you rode in may have been the place you got it. And so that's why, again, we want to test, because we also want to know, are we seeing cases in our communities that just have no contact with a known case? That means we have to up our game because we're surely looking at more and more transmission at that point.
So, Dr. Osterholm, can you speak to what is different about COVID-19 and why are things so extreme in terms of the governmental reaction?
Yeah, compared to just a regular virus.
Right.
And this is really an important point. And I first of all, I just want to compliment you. I think this discussion we're having around the table today, I've not seen it happen anywhere else at all in the whole world.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things we forget about is how many kids are involved today, not because they're getting sick, because they're not in school and they're wondering why. They're hearing things on the news and thinking, oh my, could that happen to me or my family? And so I think it is important to distinguish here what's going on. 20 to 60% of the population in the United States may become infected. And when you start doing the math on that, 5% may need really intensive care medicine. That's going to overwhelm our system. We're not prepared for that.
Right.
And so one of the reasons why people are so concerned is because we now have to find a way to provide that medical care for those people. That didn't happen with HIV/AIDS because, first of all, didn't affect a lot of people all at once. It occurred over years and years and years, and they didn't suddenly get sick and need care, but that happened over time. This one is the fact that you today don't have any recognized cases in your community, and next week you have 25. And so I think that that's part of the scariness of this.
Right.
But again, I come back, reassure families that, kids, even young adults, healthy young adults, are going to have very, very little in the way of severe disease with this. And if everybody who got it was just a kid and a young adult, we wouldn't have a problem. We wouldn't be having this discussion. But because of us older people, like myself, who or over age 65, who may have underlying health problems, this is where we have the biggest concern. Doesn't mean we're not going to see some younger people. We've had some doctors in their 30s who have gotten very sick with this, some who have died, but that's very rare. So I think the bottom line message is it's okay to be scared about this, but once you learn the facts, particularly as a child, teenager, young adult, that's good news for you. That's real good news for you.
So this is a critical aspect also. So when people hear terms like flattening the curve, right? So the extreme reaction is based on, now imagine that COVID-19 is respiratory, right? So the issue that people will have is they'll stop being able to breathe. And pneumonia and different respiratory issues. So this virus is respiratory in nature.
Right.
So imagine, I'm just throwing these out. Imagine our local hospital can handle 40 respiratory patients at one time. And under normal circumstances, 40 respiratory patients for that hospital is a lot. They'll be at 12 or 15, so they can handle it.
Right.
The way the virus is moving and the reason why we need to practice social distancing and the idea of flattening the curve is if 50 people show up at that hospital at one time to get 40 beds.
Yeah.
Right? Now you have 10 people in critical condition that aren't going to get help.
Right.
And your mortality rate shoots through the roof.
Right.
That's the idea of overwhelming the system.
Right.
So there is a certain amount of people that we can handle nationally to come in with critical respiratory issues at one moment. So flattening the curve means not getting to 80 people at one time. We practice social distancing. The virus is going to move through humanity. But as it moves through, we want it to move through at 30 people at a time for our local hospital, not 60 people at a time for our local hospital, because then we have a real problem.
Got it.
So it's no longer about stopping the virus. Right? It's about hospital systems collapsing and the National Guard having to come in. And
well, it's about preventing that.
Right? So it's strictly about not having 60 people show up for 40 beds. Right? And that's the idea of flattening the curve. So we want over the next 3 to 4 months, because it's not, it's going to be a slow pass. Well, we're trying to have a slow pass through the United States, a slow pass that's going to take 2-3 months or even more. Right? Because it's a season. It's not, we're trying to have it be a season and not be an explosion where everybody has it at one time.
Is that about right, Doc?
He nailed it. That's exactly it. That's what we're trying to do. And if we can accomplish what he just said, that will save a lot of lives. Just that. Even though the same number of people will get sick, the fact that we can save more lives will be really important. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Do you think that we are slowing down the virus with all the measures that are taking place?
Or is it too early to tell?
Is it too early to tell?
Well, I think we are beginning to slow it down in the sense we're getting people to understand it, but you have to realize for most of the country yet, a lot of people don't know anybody who's been infected. And so some people aren't taking it very seriously yet. I keep hearing over and over again, well, influenza's even worse. Well, by the time this gets done, it'll be a lot worse than influenza. So sometimes people have to be kind of made aware of what's going on in their community by knowing someone that has it. And I think that's going to happen, unfortunately, far too quickly, and then we'll do even more to try to prevent this. I think the thing that's really important is how do we help those people who are most at risk from actually getting exposed. And this, if there's anything good that comes out of this, is we need to make sure that everybody in our communities who are older, who live alone, somebody watches out for them. You may just run to the grocery store for them and leave the food on the front doorstep, so you don't even have to have contact with them. You call them up every day. Loneliness is a really hard thing. And if we're asking people to be alone, then we don't want them to be lonely. And I think one of the things that can come out of this is really a lot of positive connections. We haven't thought about this before. You know, the lady that lives down the street, you know, I should call her up. I should see how she's doing. I should see what errands I can run for her. I should see how I can help. And you know, if we did a lot of that, that'll help this outbreak because it won't put those people, I have to go to the grocery store, I don't have any food, and if I don't go, who will? Well, now somebody will.
Right.
And so I think that this is the better part of what can happen here that can make us a better people, a better country for how we respond.
I totally agree.
So this is the way viruses have passed through humanity. So what happens is people will contract it, and then, so let's say let's say someone contracts, let's say someone contracts COVID-19. After they pass the virus, they become what's known as an immunity rod. Is that the proper terminology, doctor?
Yeah, they become immune.
So they become immune to the virus, and a population becomes immune by passing the virus.
I say the other way we're working on is the vaccine.
The
Add the vaccine in there, because if we can get a vaccine, then we can get them immune both ways.
Do you think that, in your opinion, doctor, do you think there will be a vaccine soon?
I can't say soon. It's not going to save us from the next months ahead. But, you know, within 18 months or so, we may very well have a vaccine. There's a lot of study of virals, the kind of drugs that could make this a much, much less serious illness. And so that research is going on, too. And we're going to bring all the tools to the table that we have. And if we could get vaccines and drugs, and in the meantime use this social distancing and try to flatten out the curve, that's what's going to get us through it.
Right.
So the idea, because a lot of people are feeling terrified about getting the virus, and if you look at it in terms of, so you know, viruses and bacteria and microbes are the most plentiful entities on Earth. Right. So, but most viruses are harmless to even helpful. And then there's a band of viruses that make us sick. And then there's a band of viruses that kill us. Right? So this COVID-19 is in the band of viruses that make us sick.
Okay.
Right? It's not in the class of Ebola.
Right.
Right? So COVID-19 is a virus that humanity will pass, and we will develop immunity to it. And while scientists on the other side are developing a vaccine, and as Dr. Osterholm said, in 18 months, we'll have a vaccine the same way we had flu vaccines. So we're going to try to prevent it, but it's not something that you have to be terrified of contracting. It is something that a huge portion of the population is going to contract. We're going to become infected. We're going to become immune and pass it just as human beings have done for ever.
And even with the flu, like the flu changes every
Absolutely.
year. So the vaccine changes every year, you know, because it mutates and it
absolutely.
changes. So the same thing is going to happen with this COVID-19.
For 1 second, can we talk about the difference between an outbreak, an epidemic,
And a
and a
pandemic.
pandemic?
Yes. First of all, in our business, we typically use epidemic and outbreak to mean the same thing. It's an unusual group of cases, all somehow common in source, meaning that a measles outbreak, where someone has transmitted it to someone who's transmitted it to someone. They go to a theme park and they transmit it to 20 more. That's an outbreak. We don't expect that to occur. When you have a pandemic, that's a worldwide outbreak, where all these little outbreaks are happening at the same time in virtually every continent in the world. And so we very rarely have pandemics as such. We have lots of epidemics or outbreaks. Like, for example, Will just mentioned Ebola in Africa. We've had a problem with 2 large Ebola outbreaks there that have occurred in the western part of Africa and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Other than an isolated case here in the United States that came over on a plane and was hospitalized in Dallas, we've not had that problem here at all.
Right.
And so that's an example of epidemics or outbreaks that never go beyond where they originated from. It's the pandemics that we're more concerned about, because that means it's new. It usually means that many people are at risk, and oftentimes they're spread by this breathing route, which is by far the most dynamic of all the ways for us to spread a virus to others.
So you just used the word dynamic, right? So that's one of the words about COVID-19 that makes it slightly different from a normal flu. And a virus being dynamic, meaning how quickly the virus can replicate within your body, and then also the infection rate. So, doctor, can you talk for a minute about the infection rate of a normal flu versus the infection rate of COVID-19? And the word dynamic, as you were using it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, the dynamic part means that just, again, the breathing that, may do this. And it also, how many people do you typically infect? When you look at influenza, just seasonal flu that we just have been talking about, on average, people will infect about 1.4 other people, which means that that number will grow. It'll go from 1.4 to 2.8. As you can see, it goes up that way. Pandemic influenza, the new strain of virus that just emerged from an animal into humans and now is spread by humans, that one has a rate of about 1.8 contacts, so for every person. And if you add those up, that means it's still growing. It's only when you get below 1, if one person only infects 0.75 people, eventually that dies out. With COVID-19, we think this number may be as high as 2.5 or 2.6 in terms of the number of people each one infects. Well, think about this. If you go, and I'll just use 2 because it's easier math for everyone, but if you go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32, that doesn't add a lot of cases. It's not good. But when you go from 3,000 to 6,000 to 12,000 to 24,000, that's when those numbers get big. And that's what we're trying really hard to do, is stop those numbers from being big, because that's when it's really dynamic. That's when lots of people get sick very quickly. And just as you were saying, Will, not wanting to overwhelm the hospitals, that's when they get overwhelmed, is when we have those big numbers.
Right.
So what you're saying by dynamic is that this is really contagious.
Right. So, yes, absolutely.
That's right.
I just want to talk a little bit about mutation, because I remember when the measles outbreak happened in 2019, and Will was very, very, very concerned about that, because it says, you don't understand, it's been dormant. That means that it might have come back and it's mutated and it's stronger than it was before. So can you explain, can COVID-19 mutate? Can it change in any way right now? Do we have to worry about this strand getting stronger or mutating as is?
Yes. Well, viruses surely can mutate, and we were just talking about the flu just now. And seasonal influenza is one of the most notorious viruses for mutating. That's why we do need new vaccines, sometimes every other year. And that is just because it has a very, very sloppy way that it reproduces itself, and it makes lots of mistakes. And some of those mistakes are to its advantage because now it escapes the immune system of people and it becomes a predominant strain. Fortunately, with these viruses, the coronaviruses, we don't see that. They change a little bit like cosmetically, meaning that enough so that over time we can track them and say, if you saw a picture of me 30 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago, it's still me, but you can tell I'm different. And with this virus, that's all the changes we're seeing. We're not seeing a fundamental change that would make us afraid that a vaccine wouldn't work one day or that somehow it was going to do something worse. There's no evidence that this has done that or that it will do it in the future.
That's good news.
That's good
I'm really
news.
happy
Yeah.
to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to just bring in another guest to
absolutely.
join us and the doctor. Her name is Kiara, and she joins us from her home in Los Angeles. She's 25 years old and has been fighting the coronavirus for the last 10 days.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for having me. Yes, I'm actually on my 11th day today and happy to report that my fever finally broke after 10 days.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I know. I was quite nervous. My doctor said that on the 11th and 12th I would be admitted to a hospital, so I'm thankful that I don't have to go.
Hi, so you're feeling better. We're glad to hear that.
How did you contract COVID-19?
So I became ill on March 6th, so 11 days ago. And the week before, I had a friend that flew in from London. And after like 2 or 3 days of him being in town, we thought he, at that time, had like a little bit of bug. And it was a domino effect, and 6 of my friends, including myself, ended up getting it.
And what were your symptoms?
We each have had really high fevers, horrible body aches, and weirdly enough, almost everyone in my age group that I've talked to with corona has this crazy symptom of not being able to taste or smell anything.
Wow.
Yeah. And then on my 5th day, I started to get this like shortness of breath and like this kind of tightness in my chest. That's when I got really nervous because, as you guys know, when it goes to your lungs, it's like, that's when it gets scary. So I got my lungs checked. I finally got checked out. And since then it's just been a really high fever and I finally beat it.
So you said there were other people in your group. Are they the same age as you? Are they a little older than you were? That you said that
so
contracted.
everyone's in our 20s. Yep. Everyone's in our 20s
And
between the
all
age
of
of like
you in your
25 to
20s.
28.
Okay.
Did any of you have any other underlying health challenges?
So I'm the only one that's immunocompromised, which is why my doctors believe that it's been going on for so long. I have hypothyroidism. I have celiac disease. I had mono, which is caused by Epstein-Barr virus 2 months ago. So my body has just taken double or triple the time as all of my friends to be able to fight this thing.
Yeah. So your friends healed quicker than you. They recovered quicker than you did.
Yeah, totally. I had a friend that kicked it in 2-3 days, others up to 5. And luckily we had each other because, 2 weeks ago, there wasn't really that much information or even people in the state of California that were our age that were tested. So we were kind of joking with each other like, oh my God, we might have corona, like completely kidding. And then all of a sudden, as our symptoms continued to progress, we were like, okay, let's self-isolate. Let's go get tested. This really isn't a joke.
So was it easy for you to get tested when you decided that that's something you wanted to do? Was it easy for you to find a test and to get tested?
And did all of you get tested?
So yes, all of us had been tested, and to be completely transparent, it was a really big nightmare. I've actually never felt so unsafe or unsettled medically, probably in my life. Again, 2 weeks ago, a lot of doctors didn't have their hands on tests. A lot of hospitals didn't have testing yet. Just the access was non-existent, really.
Right.
So, we called 4 or 5 private doctors. We ended up calling every hospital in the LA area. I called an ER the night that I started getting my chest pains, and I was like, can I come in? They were like, no, stay home. So kind of like that panic of being like, what do I do? Where do we go? But thankfully there were 6 of us. So we kind of all worked together as a team to figure it out, you know? Thank God.
So what was your physical care? Like, what were you eating? Were you like drinking soup? Were there special, you know, was there a specific kind of medication you were taking? Were you drinking lots of fluids? Like, how were you taking care of yourself physically?
So for me, because I'm immunocompromised, I have an array of different supplements that I take on a holistic level that I think really help my immune system. But yeah, we were all doing kind of like broths and soups and chicken noodle soup and things like that. We couldn't taste or smell anything. So imagine there wasn't really a lot of eating going on.
Right.
So yeah, just that was a big one. I think Tylenol to reduce the fever is what we were taking. As we go, we learn new things. Every day there's new information. And that's why I kind of opened up a Q&A on my social media and was like, yes, I have coronavirus. I'm going to destigmatize this process. Ask me anything. And start taking it seriously, because every single day I have a friend in New York who's in his 30s and is in great health and was in the ICU on a breathing machine for 2 days. I've heard of another person here in Hollywood that's 29 who also is on oxygen. You know, it isn't just old people, and it can hit you if you have some underlying health issue the wrong way. And it's really serious that people really understand how serious this can be.
Right.
You know? Absolutely. And the amount of people that are like, oh my God, I didn't even know 25-year-olds could get this. Like, of course you can. You can get it. You have to fight it. And you have to be really cognizant of the people around you that aren't able to do so.
Right. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much we appreciate having you today and you sharing your testimony. I really feel like it's going to be really, really helpful.
Really helpful.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kiara.
And
Feel better.
Feel better.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thanks.
So we have Tanya. She is joining us from her home in Montreal. Hey, Tanya. What's your question today?
Hi. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
So I had a kidney transplant, and I take an immunosuppressant, so I have a weakened immune system. So I have 2 questions. How can I protect myself since I'm high risk? And should I be worried if everything shuts down? Can I receive my medication, or what can we do?
Got it. Doctor, we're going to have you answer that.
You ask a very important question, and you are someone who is very thoughtfully thinking about the risk that you have, because actually you do have some risk here that may be above and beyond someone else at your age. We don't have a lot of experience with showing that transplant patients in and of themselves have had a bad thing happen with this virus infection, but why take the risk? But I think you ask an even more important question about your drugs. And one of the things we are concerned about today is the vulnerability of our drug supply. It turns out that many of the drugs that we use in this country that are life-saving drugs, like the ones you take, actually are made in China. And, you know, as long as the quality is fine, that's great. But we never thought about the fact, what if that country shuts down? And we have all of our production there, what's the availability of those drugs? And so as we get further into this, if China continues to have problems manufacturing products and shipping them out around the world, then your drugs could actually be in short supply. So we're trying in our own group, doing a lot of work on this to make sure that we have those drugs, that the drug supply chains are full, and that you have that. If you can get an extra month's prescription, that's very hard sometimes with your health plans or how you pay for them. But that would be also a wise idea, because it would give you a backup. If for 1 month there wasn't enough drugs, you could get them by already having purchased them. So I think that's a really important point.
Wow.
Got it. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you so much.
One of our viewers has a question.
And I was just wondering, I'm currently self-quarantining with my 2 pets, my cat and my dog, and I was wondering, can I catch coronavirus from them, or can I give it to them if I already have it? Thanks.
Wow.
There was one event that happened in Hong Kong where we had a dog that was found to be positive in a household where an individual was also infected. The other dog lived in the household and was not. So We don't know what to make of this. We don't think that dogs play a key role at all in the transmission of this. And frankly, as anyone who has had a dog and loves a dog knows, if when you're sick, there's no one that can love you more than a dog.
That's
so
true.
I would not want you to not touch your dog or be close to your dog. That would be the last thing you'd want to do.
Yeah.
How you doing over there, Bean? How you doing?
God,
Good.
well, we have a show coming up on how to deal with stress and anxiety during this time. So, yes.
Dr. Osterholm, thank you so much.
Yes.
This has been very, very helpful. We appreciate you.
Absolutely.
And just get out in the world and keep saving lives.
Yes.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to get the message out. This is important. I think these kind of conversations should happen around everyone's table. And I thank you for leading that off and helping us all understand how we can do it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
You know, I want to thank you for, once again,
The emergency red table.
Emergency red table. Because even for me, now that I understand that literally you just breathing can be a problem, now I understand more why there's being really extreme guidelines.
Right.
I understand it's pretty contagious.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I even got more informed today myself, got a lot of clarity. So thank you again.
This is a time, you know, I think it's a really beautiful time in a way because a lot of things are coming to the surface for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And a lot of things that I feel people neglected, mainly in health, they're having to take a better look at it, and you know it's a very enlightening time.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I agree with that.
And I would say too that in a time where there's been so much negativity going around, that it is a time for us to like take a second look at how we negotiate the world and how we treat one another.
Yeah.
It's going back to that old school neighborly love. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's just how we can assist one another through this.
You know, I hope you guys feel a little bit better, and we'll keep talking. But
Thank you, you guys.
thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.